Joel Wendt here. I want to expand a little bit on the last couple of blogs, which had a kind of emphasis on things psychological. And sort of deal with the question of why we look at human psychology. One of the theses a few blogs ago was that I might be smarter than the average bear, and well, that people don't need to see that as a brag, in the sense that, politics is a hobby of mine for a lifetime. I've spent a lot of time studying it, and if you want to appreciate what goes on in politics, you have to do more than just indulge yourself in having an opinion. You need to be able to see into human behavior, because a great deal of what goes on has to do with why human beings behave the way they do. And if you just think people are arguing over this or that idealistic view, or they have, they're a liberal, or they're this or that, or whatever it is you want to say, you're going to get caught up in the surface of things and not in the depths. And it's not going to be very easy to understand the world in its political manifestations. That's the whole purpose of these blogs, in a kind of way. I'm a philosopher. That doesn't mean I'm an academic philosopher. It means basically I spend a lot of time thinking about things. I call myself a social philosopher because that's a thing I've thought about for decades. I've written about it and so on. Anyway, this human psychology, which we've examined a little bit in the last few videos, about the language of enabling and the language of addiction and the language of wounds, in order to grasp a little bit the psychology of what goes on in the world. And I want to sort of expand the dynamics of what we're looking at a little bit, because the events that we see, whether it's the healthcare thing or the war in Afghanistan or all of those things, all of that stuff occurs inside a context. And the context is, in a certain way, oftentimes more crucial than the surface symptomology. If you think about human health, for example, people display symptoms when they have a disease. And there's two different ways doctors can try to help a person who has a disease. And one of the ways that they can try to help a person who has a disease is to get rid of the symptom. But if the symptom isn't really why the person is sick in the first place, if the symptom is a symptom as opposed to the seed of the disease, then you get rid of the symptom, you haven't gotten rid of the disease. You've just displaced the energy, you might say, to another place. And this goes on in politics a lot. We don't think very deeply about it, and we try to deal with the surface things and symptoms, and we don't quite get our hands around things. For example, there's been a lot of interest over the last years by intelligent and wise people who I admire, who wanted to engage in campaign finance reform, as if there was a lot that could be developed by approaching that problem of fixing campaign finance reform. Well, nothing really changed. For all the efforts at fixing campaign finance reform, the fact was that when you actually looked at what happened, you realized that the government couldn't do the job. The ideas and the idealism that people brought to the question, that they thought would get better if we fixed campaign finance rules, never really came about. Things got nudged a little bit. And we've explored earlier the reason for this, which is to basically understand the government is broken. And of course we're trying now to understand a little deeper as to what that means to say the government is broken. Why doesn't it work? Or how it could be made to work, which is sort of a secondary question. And these are important questions if you want to actually accomplish something at the level of politics and how it affects our social life, how it affects how we live together. You really need to understand it. And just having an opinion about whether you like Joe Blow's ideas about healthcare or John Smith's ideas about healthcare, or whether something gets you all excited because somebody told you that you're going to die or live because of some decision made in healthcare, and so you run off and you join a tea party, or you're getting involved in some kind of knee-jerk liberal march, or whatever it is that you get involved in. If you haven't spent much time thinking about the thing, or if you're listening to people who haven't spent much time thinking about the thing, then you're not going to get very far. Because the real question, at a fundamental level, is how does society work? Let me repeat that. The real question at a fundamental level is how does society work? And that's a question in the scientific age, you know. We don't get our technology because people ran around having opinions about why or why not electricity did this or that thing. We get our technology because people struggled and strove to understand how it was that the electrical phenomenon represented something that went on in nature, and then with that understanding they created our technology, which we find so fascinating today. In a similar kind of way, we have to understand how public life and works, and what its relationship is to how societies exist and function, and that these are the questions which we've been tending toward in these blogs. It takes a while to sort of pull that question out of the background of the situation, because people don't immediately leap to appreciating the nature of the problem. But the fact is that we can have all kinds of opinions, all kinds of things and issues and so on and so forth, and debates and everything else, if we don't actually understand what's going on in the world. We're more, in the cliche sense, we're more a part of the problem than we are part of the solution. Now, I used the word a bit ago, context. Well, what's the context? Well, the context itself is very complicated. But we just didn't all of a sudden have a healthcare problem. We've had healthcare problems since human beings tried to fix things that were wrong with them. The social question is, how do you decide as a society what to do about people's health? Sometimes in these debates, that's where the fundamental question was. But still, even though you might have a goal, you might come to some consensus that what you want to do about people's health as a society, as a group, as a we, as opposed to an I, this will prove to be a difficult thing if you don't actually understand how to get from point A to point B. And in a situation that we have today where government is failing and actually doesn't work, isn't effective at all, then we have this problem of what we do about the fact that we don't understand what we're looking at when we look at government, or understand the context in which these things happen. So this is a lot of words to get to a certain point, and because of the limits with YouTube that require that I do one thing and then another thing and then another thing after that in these little bits and pieces, which is not bad in a way. It means you don't have to watch me talk for hours at end about something. But the fact is that if we're going to actually talk about the deeper elements of our public life and how our society is shaped by that public life, we need to think more deeply. And these videos are in support of that. You can find them useful or not.